Hello lovely people of YouTube and lovely people who continue to watch my videos and also support me on Patreon. It's much appreciated. If you want to support me on Patreon, it does help keep the channel going and you will get some free stuff. At the moment that free stuff is going to be Multisamples, which is the subject of this video. I have got a video I put up a week or two ago talking about how to get the free Multisamples that I'm gradually adding on there, which are going to be in Maschine format, Deluge format, and also just a folder of Multisamples that you can stick into Ableton Live, which if you watch this video and the next few videos you'll know what to do with them. So I'm going to do a very short series. There'll probably be about 2 or 3, possibly 4 videos on multi-sampling, how to do it, why you want to do it, and that kind of thing. Disclaimer out of the way first, I'm no multi-sampling expert, but I know enough to get some reasonable results. So the first thing is, like, why? Why would you want to multi-sample something? You could just take a sound, take one sample of it. Let's say you played a middle C, a C3 or a C4 or something like that on the keyboard. Stick it in something like Simpler or Sampler in Ableton or any other kind of hardware that will play samples. And it will kind of sound okay. What will happen is it'll take that one sample and then it'll use all its time-stretching, algorithm-y, whooshy nonsense goodness stuff and kind of stretch it or squish it to make it match the key that you're playing, the tone that you're playing. What you'll find is as soon as you start to get a few notes away from that original note, let's say you were playing even an octave or 2 octaves up, it's going to probably sound a little bit weird because it's going to have been stretched and squished and so on. So ideally what we want to do is, in an ideal world, you would have a sample of every single key, which is a very lengthy process. You don't necessarily need to do that. You can get pretty good results probably sampling like every 3rd note, and if it's a bass note, a bass patch that you're doing, you don't necessarily need to do like every octave from C0 up to C7 or whatever. You could do the lower end stuff and then let it do its time stretching stuff for the higher end things, and then the other way around. If you're doing lead, you don't necessarily need to do all the low end stuff. You can if you want. That option is there for you. So that's kind of like why you would want to do it. It's basically down to getting really good quality samples. I mean, another reason you might want to do it is somebody might have an awesome synth that you can't afford to buy. And they say, well, I'll borrow it for a week. And so what you could do with that is okay, well, rather than me trying to write a song in that week, you could go through all the patches on that, do multi-samples of them all, and then you build up a nice big library of sounds from that synth. Obviously, you're not going to have the controls of, filtering and modulation that you would get on the original synth, but you've got that basic raw sound, which you could then put in a simpler or a sampler or whatever, and then use some modulation stuff on that as well. So there's a couple of reasons why you might want to get to work with some multi-samples. Like I said before, if you can't be bothered to do your own, go support me on Patreon and you will be able to then download my folder of multi-samples. There are only like 3 or 4 in there at the moment, but that's going to grow every week, and that is from any tier, from tier 1 and above, which starts at £1, $1, €1 a month. The higher things, you get more free stuff, but that's basically it. So we're going to have a look at how to create multi-samples in Maschine. And I'll tell you why we're going to use Maschine in a minute, and also how to do it in Ableton Live. And the principle is the same pretty much in any DAW that you use, depending on the features that you've got. So we're going to start with Maschine. Let's just switch over to the laptop screen. So the reason we're going to use Maschine, first of all, it has this awesome auto sampling feature in it, which I discovered because I recently bought a Maschine Plus, discovered it on there, and you get the same thing in Maschine. I understand Logic has a similar thing. Never used Logic, but I understand it has a similar thing. Sadly, Ableton doesn't, but there is a way around it, which I'll show you in this video as well. I think Tom Cosm had made a really cool, I've never used it, a good auto sampler thing that was free, which has disappeared at the moment, but you might be able to find other ones online. If anybody knows of any other good auto samplers that are either free or paid for, or like through donation, then stick those in the comments box below, and we can all benefit from that. So let's have a look at Maschine. Let me just grab my headphones. So I've just got a random patch in. We're going to just sample something off Massive for now. we're just going to do a sample of this patch. Okay. So I mean, obviously, if you've got like, let's say you've got a keyboard that's not MIDI compatible, you would need to actually play all these notes in one at a time. I'll cover that a little bit more when we look at the Ableton one, but for now we're going to look at the good old auto sampling feature. So let's get this out of the way. So I've recently just started using Massive quite a lot. I'd never used it before. I got into it in the summer, and I just sort of got a little bit obsessed with everything Native Instruments this year because they do some awesome stuff, and ended up buying a Maschine Plus. So yeah. So this is kind of our default page, if you like, that we're going to get on here. If you've not used Maschine, it is quite a steep learning curve if you're used to using a traditional DAW, because you've got your wig groups and scenes and ideas and all that kind of stuff. I will probably do some Maschine tutorials coming up at some stage soon, for both Maschine and Maschine Plus. But anyway, to get to the auto sampling, so we've got Maschine, like I say, just loaded in here on group 1. So if we click this little waveform just here, the little thing there, it's going to bring open the sampler, and we've got various different modes down here. So at the moment we're in sync mode. So what we want to do is click on where it says sync, and we're going to choose auto, and then we get all these options down here. So the first one is for how long it's going to sample and how long we're going to keep the note on. So if I play this note here, I'm just going to play this C. Okay, we can hear that sound just fades away as we play it. So what I would do is I would count how long we need to hold the note on for. So roughly in seconds, it's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, possibly 7 seconds. And then, so that's basically this thing here. So we would want it to hold the note down for 7 seconds. So if I double click on that, you have to put this in milliseconds. So because if you put 7 in, it's going to do that. Okay. So we need to put 7,000 in there for our milliseconds. And depending on the sound that you've got, because you might have a bit of a release when you let your finger off the key, you might have a sound that doesn't die away, and then it has like a tail at the end. That is the overall length of it. So for this, it doesn't really do anything, but I'm going to just add another 2 seconds on the end of that, just to make sure we catch everything when the key is released. So that's the length section. We're then telling it what it's looking for recording. So we can have an external source. So obviously we can plug in an external keyboard and go through the sound card. But for this, we're on internal. And our input is going to be group, that one. So it's group A1 slot sound slot 1, which is Massive. So that will now listen out for this sound from Massive. And we can see here, we can check our levels here to make sure we're getting enough input sound from that. So the note map is, I'm going to come back to Stride in a minute. So the key range here is the range of keys that we're going to sample. So for a sound like this, I would perhaps go from something like, I don't know, C2 up to, I don't know, let's say C5 for now. We'll do 3 octaves. Okay, we're going to leave extend on because that's going to sort of extend things either side that range, which will make more sense when you see it in Ableton with zones and stuff. And then the stride is which notes it's going to sample. If you leave the stride on 1, it will sample every single note between C2 and C5. If you want to go really full-on accurate, best sound quality, leave it on that, but it does take a long time. I generally find I get really good results if you do it on 3. So it's basically what's going to happen is it would do a C, and then it would skip 3 notes, and then it would do the next one, then it would skip 3 notes and do the next one, and so on. So we're going to put that on 3. We've then got the velocity map. Now, a sound like this, I mean, it does change a little bit depending on how hard you hit the key. So you might want to do different things with velocities. I am going to do a whole separate video on velocities, because that's, again, quite a complicated sort of thing. For now, we're just going to have it sampling at 1 velocity, just to keep things simple. So the default setting is 100 on each. So that's kind of a nice, it's not too loud, it's not too quiet. I mean, if you want that specific sound of it being on full, then you would want your velocity to both be on 127 on those. If I set the velocity at like 1 and then 127 and left the stride at 1, what it would do is for each note, it would start at C2. It would play that note 127 times and sample each of those, okay, which is just ridiculous because you're going to have like thousands of samples in there. So you don't necessarily need that. Depends on the sound that you're using. I mean, if you're sampling something like a drum, you may want to, have a bigger range like that. But for now, we're just going to leave it. As long as they're the same amounts in there on that 127 and 127, then it will be fine. Let me just get rid of me off the screen for a second, just so you can see this last bit. Again, I usually leave extend on for now. So yeah, it doesn't matter what you put the stride on for that because the velocities aren't changing, so that's fine. Batch process. For a sound like this, which dies away, you don't really need it to loop. If you've got a sound where you hold it down and it's got a sustain level, and we'll probably look at a sound like that in when I do the Ableton one, you would want to put that on to find loop. We'll talk about loops in that one. Trim silence, I generally leave as on because it just tidies it all up nicely. Normalize, it's down to personal preference. That's going to obviously get it as loud as possible without it clipping. Sometimes I find that's a little bit iffy, so I personally leave that off, but you can quite happily do that. So once you put all those settings in there, all you're going to do is click start, and then it will go through each note and record it. So it'll hold the note down for 7 seconds, it'll sample for 9 seconds just to make sure we've got the end, and then it's going to move on to the next note. So you can see it started at C, it skipped up to D sharp at 127 velocity, and it's done 2 out of 13. So you can see if you have a small stride and a big range and a lot of different velocity levels, it takes a long time to do this. Okay, but I'm going to go through it fairly quickly for now. So I'm not going to sit here while it goes through all 13. I will edit that bit out and then we'll come back to the end and show you what we do with it next. Okay, let's bring me back up on the screen so you can enjoy the wonders of my lovely face. I say that every time. So once it's finished, it will load this in. So it puts it into a sampler and it loads this in on the second sound slot. So just to prove that we're not cheating and we're still using Maschine, I'm going to get rid of Maschine from sound slot 1. Let's just get rid. He's gone. Okay. So we're in sound 2. So once it's finished doing its thing, it loads this thing up here. So you can see the range that it's sampled between C2 and up to C5. So the extend thing is this bit down here. So it extends it on. So if we go below those octaves, let's just go down an octave on the keyboard. Okay, it will kind of do its best at time stretching and that kind of thing. So let's say these are, down there. And these are the ones where we've actually sampled them. And then it extends it above. So you can hear up there, look. It starts to sound a bit weird. But generally, I mean, you could use that as a, there you go, as a weird hi-hat sound. Sometimes you get some interesting results doing it that way. So yeah, that's basically our range. So if I now hold down the key, okay, we're getting basically exactly the same sound that we had in Massive. So I mean, you could do, I guess I shouldn't say things like this, but, you could get a trial thing of a VST that you want and sample a load of the sounds off it. And then don't buy it, which I shouldn't say because you should support companies. But anyway, so down here we've got a list of all the notes that it sampled. Okay, those 13 in that range. And then basically all you would need to do is save this as a patch. So if you right click on this, and what we want to do is choose Save with Samples because you want to save this sound relating to those samples. Okay, so you'd save with samples. You'd choose where you want it to be saved. So that's where mine is, I think. I usually do delete unused files just to keep everything nice and clean, which it doesn't want to do for some reason. So you just browse to where you'd want to do it. So let's, for the ease of me finding it, I'm going to stick it on my desktop. No, yeah, I'll stick it in desktop. Okay, and then we'll just call it, you've got to give it a name. We'll call it Massive 1, let's say. And then you click Save. and it will save them all. So if I just now navigate to find that folder, which is on my desktop over here. Okay, we can then see that we've got it up here. So we've got, this is the patch that you would double click on to load it up, drag it into and use it in Massive. And then it creates a folder with those samples in it. So you can see these are all the separate samples. So we can use these samples. Obviously you could drag those into Ableton Live or Cubase or whatever and use those multi-samples in there as well, should you so desire. So that's how you do it in Maschine, which is the quickest way of doing it because you've got the auto sampler. So what we'll have a look at doing now is how to multi-sample into Ableton Live if you haven't got Maschine. So here we are in Ableton Live. For doing it in here, I prefer to have it in Arranger view rather than session view. So first thing we'll do is we will stick in an instrument. So let's just pick something at random. We'll go Massive again. I mean, we could potentially do the same sound we did last time, but I'll see. We'll do something. Okay, and I've gone with this sound because this has got a sustained sound. So if I hold my finger down on the key, okay, that's going to just keep going forever. So this will be a good one to look at loop points, which I'll probably cover in the next video because this is going to be too long, this video, otherwise. So whereas the other one we held it down, it had a decay and obviously a sustain of 0. This has obviously got a sustain amount, and so it's a good one to use for that. So we'll stick with that sound for now. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a MIDI clip. I'm only going to do a few notes on this. Obviously, you would need to do more. But that's creating a MIDI track, you muppet. MIDI clip. I don't know what I'm doing, honest. There we go. No, still not done it. There we go. Okay, so for a note like this, so it's kind of like a bassy one. So we'll start at whatever that is. What's that one? That's going to be C1, is it? C1. Yeah, we'll do a few on C1. So we're going to put a MIDI note in there. I'm going to change my grid to a bar. We're going to probably hold it down for a bar. So let's just have a listen just to see what that sounds like when we play that. That's fine. Okay, we're probably going to want a little gap then. So what I will do is I'm just going to duplicate this note a few times. And we're going to just move them up. And we're going to go again. We'll go over 3 notes. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. In fact, no, I'll tell you what we'll do with this one. We'll do all the white notes just for ease of labelling later on. Okay, so we'll do a C, a D, an E, and an F. Obviously, you would need to do more of this based on what I showed you previously. So if we just listen to that. Okay, that will be fine because pretty much when we let go of the key, there's no release on this. So that doesn't matter. If you've got a release, you would want to have a little bit of silence before the next note. Okay, so just think about how your notes are going to play. So we've just got those 4 notes in there for now. If, obviously, I think as I mentioned before, if you've got like some really old keyboard or some sort of organ or something that's not got any MIDI in it, you would need to actually press record on live and play those notes and then record them in manually. Obviously, we're using an internal VST. If I was doing this with an external hardware synth, I would do it in the same way and just send MIDI to that and use the external instrument. It's just a quicker way of doing it, and I'll show you why. Because all we need to do, particularly if you're doing a VST, an internal thing, is we don't need to kind of let it play through one at a time like it had to do on Maschine. All we're going to do is we're going to freeze it. In fact, before we do that, just for the next bit, I'm just going to copy these notes down to here because I want those notes in a minute. So we're going to freeze it. It'll do its thing there. My computer's been very slow today. And then we're going to flatten it. So that's going to turn it into, obviously, audio clips. Okay, so these are quite not desperately loud, but if we just have a listen, we've got our 4 notes. Now, a little tip here is if you consolidate it, if you right click and choose consolidate, this is something I didn't realize till recently, is when you consolidate it, it also normalizes it, which means it puts its volume up higher. It doesn't change this, but if you go over to your browser over here and current project and go on samples, and if we go to processed and consolidate, this is the one I've just done. If I drag this in now down here, Okay, and you can compare the waveforms. Let's go up there. Okay, you can see that the consolidated one is louder. So it normalizes it. It gets it up to a volume where it's going to sound okay without it clipping or anything like that. So we'll use that version of it. Okay, and I'm getting annoying pop-up things coming up here. Go away. So I'm going to just get rid of that one and we'll use this one because this one is now normalized. So the reason I left this one here is so I know which note it was that I sampled, because if you do a big range you need to kind of know the notes, the note range that you did for labeling purposes, which is going to make life easier. So next thing we're going to do is this is why I like to do this in a range view. We're going to split everything. So Control or Command E. And all you got to do is just move your playhead along and split each one. So we've now got 4 separate track clips like that. Okay, and we're going to rename these based on the note that we sampled, and this will make sense in a minute why we're doing this. Okay, so we had C1, D1. I can't remember if it was the 1 or not, but it doesn't particularly matter. What we got next? Oh, hang on. We had E1 and F1, which doesn't want to do it. Oh, I'm up here. What am I doing up there? Oh, Christ's sake. You should know by now if you watch my channel, you don't get professionalism on here. Right, now, if we go over to our current project again here, and look at the freeze. These haven't appeared yet because we want them to appear over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each clip and we're going to go crop clip. Okay, so it's going to create like a separate little clip for each one. So you can see if you've got a lot of samples in here, it's a lengthy process doing it in here. Okay, if we now go to crop, we can see we've got all our different notes in here. The reason we've done that will be explained now. Let's just get rid of this MIDI clip because we don't need that now. So let's stick a sampler on that MIDI clip. We can get rid of that audio track as well because we don't need that. Okay, so we've got our sampler here and it says drop sample here. So we're going to just do it from this browser up here. There's different ways you can do it. This is the way I do it. Okay, I'm going to highlight all of these and I'm going to drop them in here. Okay, and it now creates this zone thing for us. So where this R is, just here, that is the root note. So at the moment, it's reading each root note as C3, because that's kind of like the default setting of how Ableton deals with samples. It reads its root note as C3. So what we need to do is we need to change the root note for each of these. So if we click on this first one, down here we've got the thing where it says root. So we would need to change this. This is why I labelled all these little samples beforehand, so we know which one is which. So that first one is C1. Now the annoying thing in this is you can't actually type it in, which is really annoying. You've got to drag it down and get it on the right thing. Again, if I'm doing something wrong and anybody knows, how to type it in here, then let me know, because this is a pain in the backside. Right, so that's C1. We click on the next one. We need to put the root of that one as D1. In fact, can you go? Oh, you can do it up and down with the cursor. Let's do it with the arrow keys. That's probably a quicker way of doing it. So we're on that one. If we click in here, and you can actually just hold that down. Let's do it. That's easier. Right, E1. There. We need to do the same thing for F1. So let's say you've got to have the patience to do this, or if you don't want to do this, then just support me on Patreon and you'll get this done. You'll get some multi-samples for free. But anyway, F1 is there. Right. So you can see now over here, these root notes have changed based on the notes that we sampled. So the next bit is where the magic happens. So we're going to right click, and what we're going to do is choose this, distribute ranges around the root key. If we click on that, you can see now that our root keys are now distributed evenly along here. You can see some of them a little bit wider depending on where we've got white notes and black notes. So if I play, so that's my C1 there. Okay, so you can hear that's playing it, and you can see hopefully that's playing that there. Now when I get beyond, so this is like the extend thing in Maschine, these are just going to be sort of Ableton's guess at getting the right notes based on that root note there. And he does a pretty good job of it. It's not bad, but, you know, we can get that going that way. And then if we go down an octave. Okay, that happens. Now, if we didn't do all that ranges thing evenly distribute thing, if I do that, okay, when I play a note... In fact, sorry, let's go back right the way to the beginning. So how it was to start with. Oop. Okay, which was like that. When I play a note, what's going to happen is it's going to play all 4 of those samples at the same time. So that's why you've got to do those root notes and distribute those notes out equally. So let's just do the old redo and we'll get that back to where it was. Zip, zip, zip. Okay, so there's the root notes and then we'll distribute them around the key. So that means it will only play, obviously these are all going to play based on this sample. These are going to play, that range is going to play on that sample. That range will play based on that sample and that range will play based on that sample. Okay, now the other problem we've got is, and if I hold the key down, okay, it's going to play for the length of the sample, but then it cuts off. We've not got that sustain. And I'm going to cover that in the next video. So this one's not going to be too long to watch. So what I would cover in the next video is how to do the basically what's called the loop points to make that loop round, and then we'll show you how to bring those into things like the deluge and that kind of stuff, and just other little bits I think of depending on what needs to be covered on the multi-sampling thing. So if you've got any questions about this that you want me to cover in that next video, get those in pretty quick because I'm going to do that over the next week or so, and I can cover any issues in that. So that's it for now. Hopefully that makes some sense and gives you 2 different ways of creating multi-samples and why you would want to create multi-samples. And yeah, usual things like subscribe, hit the bell button so you get notifications when I upload new stuff. Let's get back on the full screen so you can just don't have to look at Ableton anymore. There we go. And yeah, if you're feeling generous and you want to go and support me over on Patreon, then please feel free to do so. It's much appreciated. Like I say, it's like from £1 or $1, €1 a month upwards. And it all helps, and it keeps the channel going, and yeah, helps me do this because this does take quite a bit of time. You know, this is not my job. I do have a proper job. I would love this to be my job, but yeah, there we go. All right, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.